Trustee Barry?
Yes, we're under board discussion. I heard that we already discussed a lot, but I think the administration is looking for some kind of direction from us. So we do have to have a little discussion. Before we get into that, I want to make a little statement here. And I heard from a couple of my colleagues since our last meeting, just a couple of nights ago, thanking me. Sometimes I'm the guy that speaks what everybody else, or not everybody, but what some people are thinking. I've always been from the philosophy where you make the rules, not play by them. What do I mean by that? I grew up in the south end of Dearborn, and we used to play basketball at Morningside Park. It was a rough park, and if you didn't, you knew what you had to put up with in order to come down there. I'll keep this little light here. Don't come across the middle when I'm playing center. But when we went to the Mecca in Springwells, it was a whole different ballgame. But I observed that people played by the different rules. What am I getting at here is, at the last board meeting during a presentation, I rose my hand and waited very patiently like I've been doing for the last 12 years. I raised my hand and waited to get called on. As soon as I already asked my question, I was interrupted by a director, which was okay, he had something to put up. But then as soon as the director stopped talking, there was 3 other people that jumped in and started a discussion, and I'm sitting here waiting. I'm the old guy here. Another one of my colleagues keeps reminding me that. I forget 10 minutes later what I want to say. So the way I used to handle it is I used to put a little checklist. Okay, Jim just rose his hand, Irene, and then just go through the line. We're getting away from that. It sounds like some people, just because they can just interrupt and get a little loud and speak over some of the other board members, if that's the way it's going to go, then I guess we can all start doing that, and I think that will be a little chaotic. So with the utmost respect that I have for you, President Roxanne, I think you need to control that, not just at this meeting, just moving forward. If I'm speaking, I don't want to be interrupted. Or if I raise my hand and I get a little nod that you saw me, let's go in some kind of order. Because, like earlier I wanted to ask a question, but it was asked, and when you called on me, I said, no, thank you, my questions have been asked and answered. So I just want to make that statement before we get into board discussion. I don't know how much more we're going to discuss, but I know, there's a lot presented to us tonight. I did hear, my grandkids play basketball at Dearborn High in the Little League program, and when I go there, I hear from some of the board members. I think some of the frustration that I saw from Ms. Hussain is that they were kept, the consultants or whoever was running the show was kept reminding the committee that you're just making a recommendation, the final decision is at the board level, which is the truth. I think what they were probably trying to tell you is you're going to put this together and present it to the board, and the board will go from there. I can honestly say most of us have been through this before, and we really value committee work, truly value committee work. There was a lot of time. When you take 35 people, a couple of administrators, a consultant, how many hours were spent? We're not just going to say, oh yeah, it's okay, I'm going to go home and shred all these papers and have a discussion, and this is what we're going to decide. No, that's not the way it works. We want to hear from you. I want to continue hearing the next meeting, and most people got my phone number and Jim's phone number, and we want to hear from you. This is your money. We're going out to ask you for your hard-earned money. Now, from the percentages of the committee members that said, yes, we need a bond, that's a very high percentage. I guess it's up to us right now to find out if it's the same feeling out in the community. We heard from a couple community members, they have a different view on this, which is okay, it's their right. That's why we have the public discussion here. We want to hear from the public. I am so thankful, especially the fact that we had students. I'm blown away with the presentation and the fact that a young lady can come here and speak to the board here and do an amazing job. This is the product that Dearborn Public Schools turns out. We're so proud of that. For anybody to say that we don't care, yeah, I mean. There's probably 10 million things that all of us can be doing right now, but we're here. We're here. We want to hear from you. We want to hear from the rest of our community. And that's all I'm gonna say. I'm saying, yeah, we value the committee's work and we value. I can honestly speak for all my colleagues that we value the committee work and we do wanna hear from the community moving forward because eventually it's the community who's gonna make the final decision. We can just vote to put the question on the ballot. So I think the last one, somebody told me, you voted for the bond during a meeting. We don't vote at this level. We just vote to put the question if we think it's valuable enough and there's a need. And obviously, there's a need. We just have to find the right balance of what we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Well said, Trustee Barry. Trustee Thorpe?
So two parts. The first would be the timeline. I had asked about this at the last meeting. How quickly do we need to move forward with everything? And then the second question would be, and this would be more, I think, directed to Mr. Wall, would be, I keep thinking about a sinking fund, but to me, a sinking fund is better if you've got smaller needs over several years. Is that kind of a good summary of a sinking fund?
Yeah, it would probably fit more into the long-term plan of how to address something.
And I bring that up with the idea of a main bond, partnering it with the sinking fund to be able to take care of some of those other items. Because I think personally, I'd kind of love to get in a situation where we're preferring sinking funds to major bonds because it means it's ongoing issues and not major things, whole lists of things that need to be done at once. So those were the only two things I was gonna bring up. But yeah, what's our timeline on things? How quickly do you need us to have everything ready for you? And what level of detail do we need to give at each step?
Well, that was actually the next item. Next steps, timeline, and review. So,
I'm sorry, I had to step forward a little bit, but I'm glad that Trustee Thorpe asked that question because I had that interest as well. I know we discussed a lot of bonds. I'd like to see other options and what other districts, as I've seen the 2019, 2020, even last year, I've seen some districts passing sinking funds. Why those are being more popular, more favored now by districts. I'd like to hear their reasons, hopefully do a little bit of research myself, but I'd like to hear the administration's perspective as well for our district with this work.
Trustee Watts?
So, and I thank everyone for coming and speaking because we can't read people's minds. But what I'm hearing over and over is transparency. And so, when I'm looking at redoing a kitchen, I don't know if I can afford the kitchen because I don't know what the cabinets are. I don't know what the tiles are. I don't know what the backsplash is. I don't know what the countertops are. I don't know when it's gonna start. I don't know how long the projection will. So I take that all into account about, is it feasible that this year I can afford, say for a hypothetical kitchen. So for me, I'm hearing transparency, and to me, I'm a detail-oriented person. So when I was asking about the bathrooms, and when we're talking about those bathrooms, what are we talking about? And I know that these are the details, and it may be time-consuming, but I think if I have those, if we can present those, I think it goes back to the trust. To trust that we are being smart with the taxpayers' dollars and saying what we're putting in place is something that we wouldn't have to replace for 10, 15, 20 years. And saying this is what we would change in this school, this is what we would propose in this school. And I think that goes back to probably what wasn't done in 2019. So that if we have it on a website, and I'm just saying hypothetically, if it was on a website and saying, this is how much this bathroom in this school would cost. This is how much this would cost in this school. And again, I know it's time consuming, but I think that there's lessons to be learned since 2019 because we are asking taxpayers to think about this. And I want us to be transparent with that and give them details. And some may not want it. Some may not want the details, but I think that I'm hearing that they do. And I don't know if that's even a feasible thing to be able to propose. I don't know, but I think it is part of that conversation of how can we then, or what are the feasible steps, how would that look like? So I don't want to add the burden of additional details, but I think it's how can we make that happen? Because I know we do have something on our website when it comes to ESSER funds. That was number one. And then I think number two, and somebody had brought this up, and I think to look into it, she had mentioned the Detroit buildings and the 5 buildings. And I was just curious to know, are those elementary schools or are they high schools? Because I think that goes back to it. If it's a high school, then, you know, she said, I think it was 5 buildings at 255.
Yeah, I've seen Cody High School, Phoenix is one. And Phoenix, I actually went to that school for 2 months when I
Right.
came to the States.
So, and I guess that's the other thing is like, if they're, what are they talking
re-innovating-
about?
I think they're tearing down Cody, but for Phoenix, they're just re-innovating them.
Okay, so if they're doing it for 5 for
So they're not
255,
building
then.
brand new 5 schools. Miss Nabaz, I think she might still be here. But we could look, we could definitely
Yeah, I mean, look into that and say like, why are we
I
getting
don't think
188?
that's the final cost of brand new
Right.
5 schools. There's no way, even elementaries, you're looking, well, elementary is pushing it, but definitely I saw Cody on there and I saw, because I was actually, it's funny because I was looking at Phoenix, reminiscing about the past and when I was
So maybe
speaking
just
to
to,
the
learn something
Well,
from
the
other
word
school districts.
that was used was rebuild, and that doesn't necessarily
rebuild,
be
definitely Phoenix,
rebuild
they're
new.
talking about re-innovating
Right.
those buildings. And I'd like to also maybe,
So I guess it's a different, so
follow-up
instead of a
question.
rebuild versus a
Yeah.
new
New
one,
build.
maybe it's
they're
a.
not brand new schools.
Right, but then I guess, is that something that would be feasible? Is that part of the dialogue that we're having, right? I don't know.
Well, that is part of.
Well,
it.
that is part of the dialogue.
But I'm saying,
we're
but-
saying one elementary school right
Right.
now and on the plan.
But you were saying that Cody, that they weren't,
They're tearing down the school and building
so it's a
brand.
brand new building?
Yes, for Cody, yes.
So, but they were talking about 5 schools.
In addition, Phoenix,
don't-
like,
they're not
for example,
gonna
Phoenix Middle
all
School,
new
they're just
buildings
rebuilding it, or not, I'm sorry, not rebuilding it, re-innovating it to be a proper school, because it has been idle now for 7 years or 6 years.
Okay, yeah, I mean, again, I think there's lessons to be learned by seeing what other districts, and maybe we can learn from, if they've already done the research. So,
Trustee Petlicoff.
Okay, one thing to your question about the details, in 2019, I was the board president. We did have, what we put out in a public mailer was less detailed than, but we did have online what was going to happen at each and every school and all, and we directed people to go and look at their particular school site of what we were doing. Now, did we say it's going to be 5 doorknobs and 6 windows kind of thing? No, but it did detail to a certain extent what each dollars were going to be put into each building with that particular bond. The issue is that people have different ways of absorbing information. And there was people who didn't even know there was a bond going on until we were starting to try to, and we had put it out in a variety of sources to be consumed. So you get all that detail onto something to send out to the community at large, you don't necessarily still get that same kind of readership of it. And we had a fairly robust website for it that we would direct people to go get the more detailed list of projects. But then there was confusion from that. We had roofs on there for a building. They didn't understand that the roofs were in phases. And the dollar figures we were doing were for a peaked part, and we had already done the flat part kind of thing. And they said, well, you just did a new roof on that building. So no matter how much information you give, there's still gonna be misinformation and misinterpretation of how those dollars are. So yes, do we need to do an excellent job in trying to explain? Yes, Trustee Moses.
No,
I
no,
wanted-
good,
oh,
I'm
okay.
just raising my hand. so
Okay.
sorry. Go ahead.
Trustee Thorpe's next.
So that is one of the issues that we will continue to do. But if people have a tendency to just read between the lines and not understand the full concept and go with the misinformation, that was one of our problems when we communicated it the last time. I also want to speak to, I think she left already, the young lady who had a frustration, Ms.
Hussein.
Hussein. I've been in that chair as a parent on a task force committee over the years before I sat on the other side of the table. And it is frustrating, and you feel like after you're done, well, what did I accomplish? I get that, but if you really understand and embrace the concept that, yeah, we all have been in the buildings, we all know what we're going to need to do when we come to the final decision that we've been elected to do and authorized to do, and yes, held accountable for. But the fact is that if we don't include the community at the starting gate of it, then the criticism is that we're not listening and engaging the community. And if it was just left up to us and we have blinders on, and we don't want to give that impression that we're not open to having community involvement. It's a necessity to engage the community. They're not going to be engaged at the same level the board is required to be engaged in when it comes to the final decision-making, because we have the legal authority to do it and they do not. So the fact is that it may be frustrating in the fact that you don't get to see the full experience, but it still has great value to us to have the community input and to get a sense of what their opinions are and what direction will be acceptable from the community.
Trustee Thorpe?
Going back to the items that trustee Watts had brought up, one thing though that this board doesn't do is, well, we'll decide if we're gonna put it on the ballot. We don't break down, and these are the exact projects. We leave that to the administration, or else we're micromanaging them.
Right.
And the second thing is, we usually aren't gonna put a price tag on it because that cost is going to change, even if we're just talking about a year from now. We don't wanna be having people come back, well, you said it would cost you $1,000 and it cost you $1,200. Well, things change. So we would need to keep some flexibility and always let the professionals do their job, whether it's Mr. Wall doing the numbers, Mr. Andrews looking over the buildings, Mr. Addy with the technology. We'll just make the decision if we think it's a good time for us to go out to the community, but we're not gonna micromanage this.
Agreed. Well stated.
President
Yes,
McDonald, as far as direction, and I hope that my colleagues would hear me out on this one. I think I can recall my remarks right after the defeat of 2019 bond. And I said a word that might be offending to some, and I apologized for that we were out of touch. And indeed we were. And we don't want to be out of touch again. And I'm glad that the committee has worked tirelessly to bring us those recommendations. And this is not to say your recommendations were not great or they were actually amazing, but I want to even get a further community pulse from the residents. And obviously this platform, I wish more residents appear today and voice their concerns or voice what they want to see. Because we take those comments and those suggestions very seriously. And whether you were here, you were not able to meet, please correspond to us. But I'd like to, this board, and perhaps direct the administration to go a step further and to do a few, I know we do have the chatting with the superintendent, we talk about specific school things and school events and where we're going. But I'd like to hear, especially for the month of April and now that COVID has been loosely, again, untightened, and we could even do a hybrid approach where we do certain Zoom operation or Zoom meetings where we invite residents in community schools. We go to, for example, the South End community, East Dearborn community, West Dearborn community, Southwest, Northeast, and we talk to those community schools and we say, what would you like in our next bond? What would you like to see in your neighborhood schools? And that will give us, I think, even more, may give us a lot of more information. It might be an information overload, but we can cater that in and say, this is where the community actually wants to go. Because I feel like we do hear from residents, which are great, and they're very outspoken, but we need to hear from the entire community, and we need to be more accessible. I know that we were talking about transparency and accessibility, and we are very accessible. Obviously, anybody can go to dearbornschools.org and contact each one of us. As Trustee Barry, our phone numbers are available to many. Mine is available on my website. or on my Facebook page or whatever. But I'd like the entire board to be accessible to all the residents to say, this is what I want, and we need to meet the residents where they are. Whether it's a PTA meeting and then we convert it into, or the chatting with the superintendent and we leave a segment for collecting the input, or where the administration can create a community survey that we can market, and we could say, what would you like to see in your board? Then we can aggregate that and also present that perhaps next meeting, something that we would like to see. The other thing that I would love to see, and something that I think was lacking in our 2019 proposal, was we always were criticized for the communication, or at least, not anyway, Mr. Mustin, but it's the visualization for me, the user experience when they go on the website. Yeah, they would like to download a PDF and see a 19-page document with all of the list. I would like it to be more visual, where they would see perhaps the map of Dearborn schools. They click on each individual school and see, this is what the thing is gonna happen at Fortson with this bond. This is what I'm gonna get at Oakwood. And to be more photos, and again, I know last time we were more infrastructure, back end, you don't see the back end. But we wanna be more visual. Obviously, the attention span of children right now is much shorter than it was in the past. Yet a lot, adults too have a very short span. So to go through that PDF and go through the list, it would be nice to do that as well. But I would like to see visualization. I'd like it to be put up in Arabic and English and perhaps even Spanish, where we want to reach as much as possible. I know I'm putting a lot of work on the administration here, but we want to be at a position where we did our best. We were transparent, we were there, and we did everything that we could. And this is up to you to invest now in our schools. And you can audit us as a citizen, you can audit us as an organization. We do get audited. And if there is any wrongdoing, or I hear a lot about waste management, and in every organization there is waste management. We'd like to see, but if there is, allegations of misuse of public money, that's a huge offense that we would be liable for as a body. But we want to be as transparent as possible. We want to communicate very well. And we want to go, if we were going in this November for a ballot proposal, that we've done all of the things. We've listened, we've taken your considerations. Now, we're not going to take all of your suggestions because, let's face it, we have constraints that we have to meet. We have budgetary, we can't tax people more than what they could be taxed. The gentleman here was talking about 61 mills, it's actually 57 mills now, as I checked with the city last time. But it's still high in Dearborn, it is. And again, everybody has to chip in. The city recently lost their 3.5 supplemental. Henry Ford College, again, we had a discussion about the highest in the state of 4 mills. We have to resolve this issue not just from Dearborn schools, but everybody. But my heart is in this district and the college that we all oversee. And I would invest every single dollar of my tax dollars. I would happily pay that money. I know other residents are hurting, as the person mentioned, especially new residents. And I feel for you, and I know it's very difficult, but this is a trade-off that you're making. That's why houses in Dearborn, Trustee Berry here is a realtor. He can tell you how many days does a house in Dearborn stay on the market. What is that, Trustee Berry? A few days?
Couple days, yes.
So Dearborn is still wanted, which is, it's amazing to be wanted. But we do still want to make it affordable for residents and to offer quality education. It is a very tough reality. But again, I'm willing to take every penny that I do get charged for my taxes and say, let's build a brand new school every 5 years. Can I do that myself? Yes. But can others do it who have very low income and living on a paycheck to paycheck? Perhaps not. And we have to think of everybody when we make those decisions. Thank you,
Trustee
Madam
Barry?
President.
Yes, trustee Moses, no reason to apologize for calling it the way it is. 2019, if we didn't learn our lessons from 2019, then shame on us. Yes, we were out of touch. Messaging was poor. And this is not directed at anybody because it's us as one team, Dearborn Public Schools and the Board of Education. No reason for apologies. We just need to keep moving forward.
Absolutely.
Dearborn's always been very, very generous to the schools. And that's why home values have kept their values. And most residents understand that. So somehow, some way, that needs to be communicated. Now, in 2019, there was a new world compared to, the last time we went on in 2013. 2013, the bond, if I'm correct, passed like 68% approval. Previous bonds have seen approvals of 70 plus or 72 plus. There's this thing called social media that happened in 2019. I don't know if we were prepared to send our messages out in that platform. Yes, obviously we did a poor job for us to get only a 49% approval for a bond. I mean, that's telling us something. Now, I'm not advocating for or against at this point. We need to have further discussions on this. But Dr. Maleko, you're welcome to disagree with me. But if money was not an issue, obviously it is an issue, but if it wasn't, our high schools need attention. We've heard it a couple times tonight. We hear it always in the community. We heard it in 2019. It was loud and clear, but we didn't listen. There is a problem in our high schools. It's called overpopulation, overcrowding, class sizes, pick up and drop off. I would love to see, and I would pay for it, I would love to see maybe an aerial review of any high schools for 10, 15 minutes before the schools open. It's crazy. Today I was driving, I don't know why I did, because I usually take Telegraph, but I took Auto Drive from my house to Michigan Avenue. And it took me about 6 cycles for that light to change when we get across the light in front of Dearborn High. And the last time I stopped there, a kid almost got hit by a car. And it wasn't the driver's fault. Kids are getting dropped off here, there, everywhere. There is a crossing guard there, but some parents decide to drop off their son because he's late. They decided, hey, jump out of the car and run across the street. The kid almost got hit. I started beeping to get the attention of the driver, and thank God he did hear me, and he might have saved the kid getting hit. But that happens in front of our schools. Kids get hit by cars. We used to have a problem at Fortson High School. Let me finish, please.
Sorry.
We said no interruptions.
So sorry.
We used to have a problem at Fortson High School and decided to start busing kids to West Dearborn. We self-created a problem at Dearborn High. We just had to build 4 classrooms, and it was a big cost. To me, that's putting Band-Aids on buildings, but we started seeing a problem at Dearborn High, but we expanded on Dearborn High. We did that. Now, the last time we talked about borders and what we're gonna do, we moved that line in East Dearborn further east to send more kids to Etzel Ford. So we're now creating another problem at Etzel Ford. Eventually, we have to get to it. We, the 7 of us, have to answer to the community, and we have to get to it. How do you do that? Can't dodge that question. We heard hallways. When was the last time any of us were in the hallways in between first and second hour? You don't want to be there. Cafeterias. We're up to, I think, 4 lunch periods at one of the schools. These are real problems. And that's why we get some frustration, because the same problems have been lingering. With all due respect, I got nothing but the greatest support for this administration, and I've always defended, I've been saying it all along that this board is finally gelling. We're working together. I'm loving this compared to maybe a few years ago. But with that being said, the gentleman that was frustrated here, maybe he's advocating against a bond, period. That's what I was starting to hear, because in the beginning he was on the right track, then he went a different direction. But there's a lot of people are feeling that way. when we start hearing that, we're going to take students out of high schools and send them to different programs. To me, I'm hearing that we're going to rob kids out of their high school experience. Is that the right thing? Just because we can do it, does that make it right? So in the presentation, I heard something about $188 million to build a high school. I have no idea why that would be included. Why would that be fed into that group of parents? And again, thankful for the parents and all the students and everybody else that served on that. Where did that number come from? Whoever talked about building a high school the size of Fortson? I've never heard that discussion before. I don't know why the consultants threw that number in, or why would we build a high school for 3,000 students when we know we already have a problem? We just need to alleviate maybe 25% of the population at Fortson, 25 at Dearborn High, maybe 18 to 20 at Etzel Ford, if we decide to go that route. Again, I'm just presenting the case here, and I know you heard it, and I know you heard it, and I know he's heard it, and I know that Dr. Malik has heard it a lot. We have these problems at our high schools, and if we're not gonna be able to do it this time around, what can we tell the community? What are we gonna do? Is it a combination of building a high school and fixing some of the buildings that need fixing? Is it a sinking bond sooner than later to build a high school? That would be a decision that the voters will have to make. Now, I know I keep getting advertisements here, plugs for being a realtor. Thank you, but that's not what I'm trying to do here. But I know when I get a call, when I put a sign in front of a house today, people start calling. 3 questions they ask. What's the price? What's the square footage? Talk to me about the schools. And that's my moment of pride when I start talking about the schools. Now, if somehow, some way, with all due respect to our seniors, that older couple that live over there on Rosevere that don't have kids in the schools or grandkids in the schools, how do we tell them that in order for your home value to stay where it's at or increase has a direct correlation with the schools and the jobs that we've done? A lot of things I heard negative about the schools, we know that that's not true. We've invested in social workers, and there still continues a big push to spend more. We've invested in programs. We do amazing jobs. Our kids are going on to Big Ten schools. They're going on to other major universities. We're doing a great job. So to sit there and say Dearborn Public School doesn't deserve the money or the investment because they're just doing a terrible job and their board, sucks, or excuse my language, or the superintendent doesn't know what he's doing. No, we do great things. I am sorry, I'm not gonna apologize to saying that we do amazing things. But we need to put that message out to our investors and then let them know what are we doing in the direction this district is going. Then it's up to them. I kept on hearing from members that, it's the board members' final decision. The board could only put the question out to the voters. They make the final decisions, the voters of the city of Dearborn and a chunk of Dearborn Heights. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Dr. Maleko.
So I just, again, want to thank the committee. And first, I just want to say, too, that appreciate the presentation, again, the people that have been here. Everyone here tonight, it's a good, open, and honest discussion. There was obviously dialogue and there was public comment that were taken into consideration. I would say that we've had to make a lot of tough leadership decisions, especially over the last 2 years, as the board is aware. And when you make those tough decisions, you know that at times people, under COVID especially, there's going to be differing opinions. One of the things we've always done, and we prided ourselves on, in doing what's right by our students in the school community, and monitoring, looking at data. We have a tremendous amount of data here. We did that with COVID. I'm proud to say the board guided us with administration and supported us for these tough decisions when we went online, to when we went back, and to when we maintained in-person instruction. And we never made any kind of knee-jerk reactions. We were always very thoughtful, thorough with what we were doing. Again, a year ago, we put this on, 2 years ago, we put this on pause because of COVID, because the biggest thing facing everyone was COVID. I would say to you, and I heard, you know, about time of people. There would be from administration and the board and everyone really, especially administration, there'll be an extra amount of time commitment, energy, that needs to go into running a bond proposal. So from a personal aspect, it's gonna be a tremendous, extra, you know, responsibilities. But as we've made tough decisions during COVID, and sometimes we know that, you know, people disagreed and whatnot, but I think they respected that we went through the process. I respect the committee process, and I respect the fact that we have to make these decisions because, I mean, these decisions that we're making right now in this board are gonna be impacting at some point, 5 to 10 years down the road. At some point, I won't be here. At some point, all of us won't be here. And it's really for the people that are gonna be here next, the next generation of students. And so that is what this is about, and it's really a decision for the community. I'm saying I'm willing to take that on, to take on that extra. I remember the last campaign, and it took a lot of energy, and we were all wiped out by the end of it. But I'm willing to do that for the benefit of the students and the school community. But ultimately, it is going to be a community decision, as you said, when the community votes for the ballot. I would also say that the macro level, the committee input is huge because, for example, the board now is going to make a decision at some point whether to go for a 2022 bond. That's a huge decision. If we don't do it, then that's off the ballot. The bigger decisions too are the balance that was presented very nicely between what are the priorities. These are decisions that then will go down to administration. And yes, administration's job then is once there's direction to take the detail, because we have the professionals, because we have the contractors, we're gonna get into the weeds and into the detail, and that's why we're here to do that, as Trustee Thorpe said. But the bigger macro picture, the committee input that is giving to the board is important and it does matter. Because there are going to be the micro decisions will all be relative to the bigger decision as to whether we go for the 2022. How many mills? How many mills that the committee is recommending? That is a huge aspect to what we can and cannot do. And then the philosophy, and we understand it, of the new building versus renovation, which we know we're under a situation because we have so many needs in the district. I do think the high school question is an important one, and I think a lot of that comes down to, you know, philosophy on education. And there is research out there about, you know, Dearborn's high schools are very large. And maybe that's something we need to study further, you know, to really look at that in depth. So when the committee discussed that, that's now coming here in public meeting for further discussion. So I just want to say I value this. For me personally, the weight and the recommendations of the committee have a huge bearing on what's going to then funnel to the board, which will then give us direction as to what we need to do. And, you know, if we're not ready for 2022, we're not. But we can see the consensus of the committee saying there is an infrastructure need. That's the one thing, and I think every board member here. And I'm going to tell you, again, it's going to be for people at some point when I want to retire from Dearborn Public Schools. I want to, but at some point I won't be here. And that is where those decisions are going to really have an impact. So it really is going to come down to the community. We know we have infrastructure needs, as was articulated. We know that the state system is not functioning properly for infrastructure. So that's why we have to go to the taxpayers to really make a difference. And if we don't, then we're gonna still do what we need to do, but we're gonna have to go to those priority lists. And we will. We'll keep the schools functioning, but we won't be able to do those changes that we heard here tonight. We want these major changes of these big buildings and make it really exciting. Exciting for special education students. Exciting, we're hearing on a federal level and state level about expansion of GSRP in preschool. These are things that are exciting that we cannot really expand, or possibly a fourth high school. We can't do that without a potential additional funding that would come from a taxpayer decision on a bond. But again, it will be, as you said, I appreciate the comments and I appreciate the support. And I know each of these board members around here, and you deliberate. I've known many of you for many years and for shorter time. And these decisions weigh heavily on you. And the reason I know is because you ask me a lot of questions and we provide a lot of information. And you take it very seriously, your roles, and you have the utmost integrity. And so I just want to say I thank you for going through this process. And there will be differing opinions. And I think that is also showing us some of the challenges that we have out there that we're going to face with the bond, with information and all the things out there. And I do agree with what Trustee Barry said. You know, there was a game changer with social media and other things that, as we know, it's being implemented at different levels, and communication methods are at a different level. So I just wanted to thank everyone. Again, I also want to reiterate that the committee, I would not put all these and it doesn't cost more because they're salary employees. So there's no extra cost per se on a dollar, but there's extra energy and time that they've all put in to understand, because they understand it's important. And I would not put everyone through that if we weren't going to take these decisions seriously. You have my word on that. And it is going to impact my recommendations that I'll make to the board, and or when the board gives me some final directions. It definitely will have an impact, I know, on all of your decision-making process. So thank you.
Well, it's been a long evening, and I know that we've asked for a lot of additional information. I think that the notes have been taken on some other things that board members wanted to see. As far as the timeline, I don't think that we're there yet. So if you'd work on the information that the board has requested and getting that to us, and,
Well,
trustee
with the
Petlicoff.
timeline though, we do have to have some definitive direction given if we're gonna have a ballot question
Right.
by a certain month and date.
Absolutely.
So I
If you
think
could-
everybody needs to hear at least that.
If you could generate that timeline, for sure.
For the next election in November, we have to have the ballot submitted to the county clerk by August.
By August?
Yes. If we're going to a state qualified process, we have to back up at least 60 days from that.
Okay,
If we do a non-state qualified, which is that 1/4% difference,
Yeah.
we have all the way to August.
okay.
What does that mean all the way to August?
That's when the board would actually
Yeah, no,
have
I'm
to
saying,
take
what does that
action to
mean?
say, this is the ballot question we want to ask.
So am I hearing you say if we make a decision to go out for a bond in November?
August, the
Before-
date we have to submit
before
something to
August.
the city clerk or the county clerk.
How much time would you need to put together what you need to put together to
Well,
Submit
that-
it.
submit it?
Well, to us, that then it's up to us what to design what it is. So, you know, obviously the direction from the board earlier on helps us fine tune of what we're gonna look at and set priorities.
And if we're talking about transparency and lack of communication, if you wait until August and then we put something together and then we have to go out and try to tell everybody about it,
Yeah, that's
we are
really-
gonna
It's
get
not gonna
nothing
work.
but criticized for not giving out communication. I'm not gonna take that again. So realistically, if you wanna get something on November ballot, we need direction by April, May at the latest.
That's-
Otherwise,
that's
this
what I want
community
to
is
hear.
gonna eat us
Yeah,
up and
that's what
spit
I
us
need to
out.
hear.
Because they are going to blame us for not communicating with them. I'm not taking the rap for that again. So this board needs some kind of direction to the administration by April, no later than May. Excuse me, I'm sorry for the outburst. I apologize.
There's nothing to be sorry about.
Absolutely
We're
not.
here for a reason. We're all on the same team. But from what I'm hearing is we're still doing some work. There was probably a lot of questions in the committee, and that weren't answered, and there were some questions from this board that we just heard tonight that we still need more time, we still more time. We're in April. You're saying you need an answer in April? We can't put this on the agenda next month.
I understand.
April's around the corner.
I understand.
May might be a little tight, but that's what I'm trying to get at. Is it May? Is it June? How much time do you need after this body makes a decision to put the application together and send it to the state?
Yeah, nothing that was said today or requested, we shouldn't have available before the April board meeting.
So we can probably continue this discussion at the April meeting,
Do we
That's-
talk
want,
admon our colleagues and with the superintendent, Dr. Maleko, and hopefully, yeah, sooner than later. We don't want a last minute campaign. That's not transparency. And we're gonna have a lot of, comments like this gentleman threw at us. There was a lot of punches thrown. And he has every right to say that. I mean, I'm not questioning what he said or what he didn't say, but we put ourselves in a position to hear that kind of You felt it. You paid a big price. Tom, Dr. Maleko, all of us, we all felt it. I'm still feeling the hurt in my ribs from the last bond. So let's have a good plan. Let's get ready. Let's give communication a chance to put the messages together and put them out. We need to combat what's gonna come on social media. There's these WhatsApp groups right now where there's like 500 people, 600 people together discussing things as we're speaking right now. So we need to get ahead of the game. Nothing to apologize about. You shouldn't apologize, trustee Mosley shouldn't apologize, nobody has to apologize. We're here to have a good, clean, honest discussion together. Because if we decide that, hey, we don't have time to do this, or, that's gonna set the district back. This 2019 would have helped, okay, that's behind us. Let's look forward. Last year, 2 years ago, everybody knows what we're dealing with. We need to get to this, and we have to do it the right way. There's no reason for anybody to apologize moving
Trustee
forward.
Thorpe?
The two items I would bring up, along with what you just said, Mr. Wall, was 60 days before August, probably to do a state qualified, which should be a lower interest rate, which should mean more dollars for the same amount of mills.
Correct.
So June is the
Looking at June.
end, and I agree with Mr. Mustin, and the more time we've got to get this information out, the better. So I think this board's gonna need to accept at some point that they might not be able to give us all the answers before we have to decide what we think has to happen. I think April, we need to make the decision. I don't think we wait till May. I think you're always gonna find something else that you need more information on, but life doesn't work that way. We have to make decisions.
Trustee Peschakov?
And then trustee Mills.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He had his hand up.
No, no,
before
go
me.
ahead.
Okay.
That's okay.
Mine's just go really quick.
Sure.
Do we want to hold another special session to finalize this conversation so we can give direction sooner rather than later?
Do you think that would be necessary, or do you think we could have it on as a discussion item
Do
at
we-
at April's meeting and come to, and at that point, we could say, okay, these are the things that we need to decide.
Well, as long as that's the only thing on the agenda, I guess, because if
Okay.
we have other pressing things, I think that conversation of where you would, not only do you require us to say, yes, we're going out for a bond, yes, we want it for 3.5 mils, and have that conversation finished, you also need to know what we're gonna do with it, because that is part of what you have to submit, if I'm not mistaken. You have to tell them what you are going to use it for, as well. So we do have to have the full package ready, not just one piece here and one piece there, and then say, okay, we'll give you the rest of it later on, and continue to discuss.
We talked about at least having a direction, so we can put something together as administration, because David and I talked about having public opinion before the final decision is made.
Well-
That way, we know that, people, we can see if they are comfortable with it, do they want to go back to the board, have the board readjust it? I think one of our criticisms that we went out and had a plan and put it out there, and the public felt they didn't have a chance, for whatever
To
reason,
react.
to react to it, because it was too late by that time.
Okay, so trustee Mosley?
Thank you. I just have one thing for David, and you, again, you don't have to apologize, but you can communicate from now what we're doing today. And I think you do a good job of that, but we need to probably uptake that and say that the board this is what we're talking about. Because that's something that we were criticized for 2019. And there was a lot of misinformation that, hey, we started this conversation in March or in April, and we got it passed in June, and we packaged it together and sell. No, the conversation was way before, actually in November. That's when that committee was made. Again, going back to the VIP committee, I would like to get a macro information from the residents and from the school communities, and just a pulse, whether it's online surveys, whether it's meetings where listening sessions. And I know that time is tight,
Yeah,
but I think we could do something online where you can push this survey, as we surveyed parents on COVID situations, and we surveyed parents on other related school issues. We need to hear those thoughts, even if it's technical. Would you prefer a sinking fund, or would you prefer a regular bond? What period are you comfortable? We need to know what would they be accepted to reach that you're willing to pay 3.5 for an amount, a return of these new schools and these new additions and these new repairs. The other thing that I'd like to, I know we're in the weeds, but I'd like to take a kind of an eagle view and say, let's look down the line of 40 years, 50 years. Which schools would be around by then? I know Dr. Maliko says we won't be around here probably. Other people will be in our places, our children and our children will perhaps be here. But we would like to see, is Lowry School, for example, is gonna stay for another 30 years? I'd like to know that information. Because if it's gonna go down in 20 years or 30 years, I would like to have a plan for that and let the residents know, hey, we have this school, or we have Salina School or Deval that is deteriorating and it's breaking apart. And it's at that point where we say, let's cut our losses, you know, demolish the building, build a brand new one. Could be a huge cost, but when do we take that bullet? And it is a very tough decision that we have to make. And the last thing that I want to talk about, selling. When we sell the bond, you know, for the last one, I did straight up presentations about facts. I did not go to residents and advocated for a yes or no until my last 2 weeks, where I said I'm voting yes, and this is why. As a board member, I know I can do that. As the administration, legally, they cannot do that. They'll tell you just facts, right? They're obligated by law not to sway you yes or no. Of course, they would like it to be passed clearly, because this is impacting our buck, and we're relying on residents. And I hate to say it, that we're still relying on residents to help us out and bail us out each time. And they come out strong, as Trustee Barry mentioned, and they come and support our schools. But when there is confusion, when there is a lot of misinformation, or we're not clear, or we didn't get to the level where we convinced 70% or 80%, I would not be happy with a 54, you know, what is it, 46 vote. I would not be happy with that. That means 46% voted our bond down. That means that we're not doing something great. I would love to see an approval rate of 70%, 80%. That will make me feel good. I know there are so many naysayers about they will never pay tax for anything. They don't care about school. They may not care about schools, or they do care about schools, but they don't agree with us, and that's fine. I mean, again, democracy. You disagree. You don't want to pay tax. It's okay. That's your thing. But I know majority of people would love to have amazing schools because they do know the major correlation of tax value, the taxes, or I'm sorry, the value of your house is as good as the quality of the nearby school, whether you have kids in that school or not. So, but we need to know what is that price that we can reach that student. Reach that, clearly I need to go home and sleep. We need to know that parent or that taxpayer, what are they willing to pay? And in order to do that, we need to get that pulse, and I hope that we can consider that. Thank you.
Trustee Watts?
So from what I'm hearing, I think I would propose additional study session, because I'm hearing that we're not necessarily, we don't know if we want a sinking fund versus the other option. And I think to delay that to the April meeting would do us a disservice, because I think if we could get that information sooner, it'd be better. Second, once we get that information, I think what Trustee Moses was saying, and I agree, that we would need to then go out to the community, whether it's the community groups, and meet them where they are to kind of get that sense of who they are. Because we can also do it online, but I think it's something about having that face-to-face discussion and dialogue that sometimes you don't get on Zoom and you don't get on paper. And then I would say from there, then we could come together as a board and vote. And I would love to say that's April, but then I think we're doing a disservice by not going to our community and asking them, so that they don't come back and say, well, you didn't come and ask my opinion. And if we want this to be inclusive of everybody's opinion, then I think we need to reach those people and say, this is where we're gonna be, and we've had a study session, and this is just what we've discussed, nothing's been voted on. So I think there needs to be 3 sequences.
Okay, one, Mr. Wall, can you explain a sinking fund? Because I think it has limited funds that available, correct?
Correct. So with the sinking fund, it's limited to brick and mortar type events. So if you wanted to refurbish a chemistry lab, you could do the guts of it, but you might not be able to maybe do some additional things like robotics. If you want to build a robotics lab, you can build a lab, have the electrical components, but you can actually buy the robotic arms because that is considered equipment. If it's not attached to the wall, the sinking fund has that aspect. So can you build a new school with a sinking fund? Yes, but you can't buy the tables, the chairs, the cafeteria tables, all that fits in it. So that would be additional expense beyond that. Where a bond fund has more broader expanses where you could do additional things like buses. If you wanted to build a new school, you need new buses to actually transport that portion separate from your regular portion. You could do something like that.
Okay, it still requires a
Vote of the
vote,
community, yes.
and does it require the same kind of detail?
No, it does not.
It does, so you
you're-
don't have to say, I'm going to do A, B, and C with the dollars.
Right, for a sinking fund, you just levy the number of mills and it can only be used for those specific purposes by law.
But, yeah, but it's already dictated by the state what you
Right.
do with them.
And you're
is
limited
what
to
the
3
difference-
mills for 10 years. So if you average, 3.7, let's round it to 4, then you were looking at $40 million for the life of that series. When you're talking large scale improvements, like what we're talking here for our infrastructure, that's a limited, maybe a short-term approval, but it doesn't deal with the long-term aspect of what you have to do.
So would we be able to do security things like cameras and all
No,
of those?
cameras, no. You could do the wiring for the cameras, but you
But
couldn't
not,
actually
that's
purchase
what
the
I thought,
cameras
okay,
itself.
so it
Yes.
has, significant limitations when it comes to the additional,
Correct.
bells and whistles.
Yes.
All right, I just want to make sure everybody understands the difference between a sinking fund and a bond.